Welcome to the Off Balance Podcast, where faith, family, and business collide with your host, Dr. Brooks Deming, Christian life coach, intercessor, and entrepreneur.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Brooks. Welcome to Off Balance, a podcast for adults trying to balance life. Thank you for tuning in each week to learn strategies to help you be the better version of yourself. The sponsor of today's episode is Clothed by J. Christine, a Christian-based clothing store offering quality and affordable clothing for the everyday fashionable conscious woman. Today's guest is a phenomenal woman, mother, and entrepreneur. She is the founder of the movement Girl Get Up and Flow. On a daily basis, she encourages women who have endured pain or domestic situations that has left them feeling stuck or feeling as if they have fallen to get up and flow. It is my honor to welcome to the show, Annastacia Knox.
Hi, Dr. Rose. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I am doing well. I am so excited for my listening audience to be able to meet you because you are such a phenomenal woman. So I am excited to have you. So thank you for tuning in with us on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
So can you tell the listening audience, who is Annastacia?
Yes, Annastacia is a 27-year-old woman. I have 2 kids. I am a very happy woman, just striving and seeking the heart of God. Just happy to be here on earth and continuing to seek what God has designed for me or created for me or sent me down here on earth to do. I'm just seeking my purpose and destiny that God has sent me down here for.
So when you say seeking God, what does that look like for you?
Seeking God for me just means learning God for who God is, being able to see God on different levels or whatever He exposes to me or allow me to see of God, and also knowing what I was created for. I strongly believe that everyone was created for a purpose. So when I say I'm seeking God, I'm seeking what I was created for, what He sent me on earth to do, and just trying to learn God for myself and grow to be the person God has destined for me to be.
Yeah, that's very important because I think a lot of the times when we grow up, especially if we grow up with people around us that have their own relationship with God, we tend to think that we can lean into their relationship. So I commend you for being 27 years old and actually seeking God for yourself, because like I said, that's very important. So can you just tell me, what is it like? Because you're so young. So does your pursuit of God, does that like impact how you live?
Honestly, it does. It definitely impacts how I live. For me, I would definitely say it's a challenge. It's nothing easy, but I'm so grateful that I've decided to seek God. I would say it's just like unraveling a gift. You know, you never know what you get. You just wake up and just continue going and seeing what God has for you. So it's challenging, but it's definitely amazing. And I wouldn't trade anything for it. And I'm so glad I am seeking God and trying to walk with God.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, have you always pursued Him, or is this like a new relationship for you?
I've always known who God was. I was raised into the church, into a very religious background. But as I got older, my grandmother passed away, and she was the one that kind of kept me and my family into the church and had all these yard sales, vacation Bible study. But once my grandma passed away, once I graduated high school, I'm being honest, I geared away from God. I stopped going to church. I stopped praying. And in one of my darkest seasons of my life, I just really sought out for God and just experienced God on another level. And it just lit a fire under me to want to seek Him more.
Yeah, that's really good. So being 27 years old and then you are trying to seek God, what is dating like?
If I'm being authentic, I'm definitely still getting the sit downs from God, the no's, and it can be very lonely at times, especially when you have that connection and God is constantly reminding you, I have better for you. It can be very challenging, definitely, if you have a personal relationship with God, and sometimes he'll allow you to go through things so you can learn things. So not everything is always good for me. I have my ups. I definitely have my downs, but dating for me is definitely a roller coaster. I'll say that.
So how do you keep yourself just grounded? And when I say grounded, I mean, because of course you have principles that you need to uphold, but also you're 27. So how do you just keep yourself grounded, and what advice can you give for other young ladies or men that are listening?
I would say I keep myself grounded by, for one, understanding that walking this life with God is going to be constant discipline. It's going to be constant ways that you can learn. You're never going to get everything down pat, even if you have to get discipline at times from God. It's okay to make mistakes. I just try to discipline myself and just be patient. I constantly have to remind myself that God has to say so. God has the plan in my life. So I try to strengthen my prayer life with God, try to ask God to strengthen my discernment. If I feel something or God reveals something to me about someone, I try my best. And I say try my best because it's not easy. As oftentimes we want to make the best decision, or when God shows you something, I know me, I'm a little hard-headed, and sometimes I'm a more of a actual person. I learn from the mistakes that I make or the experiences that I have. So I would definitely say ground yourself in God, develop a more intimate relationship with God, constantly communicate with God. I encourage everyone around me. I had to learn that, coming from a Baptist background, we think God only wants to commune with you in church, but I had to learn God wants to be in every area of your life, even in your dating life, your friendships. Keep God in it. Even if that's not who God has ordained you to be, trust that God has a purpose for everything. Even if that person is there for a season, just try to look at it that way. And that's what I try to do. I try to train my mind to God, align me to your will. So I more so try to discipline my mind in accepting what God has for me and not always craving things out of my flesh.
That's really good. And I also like that you said you're trying to train your mind, because a lot of the times it's the mind that gets the flesh to do exactly what it desires. So I'm glad that you share that with the audience. And then you also mentioned that you grew up Baptist, and that typically Baptists feel that God is only with them in church services. I can attest to that because I also grew up Baptist. And when I realized the older that I got, I realized that they did place God in a box with so many limits, so many limitations on him. And so how did you, first off, how did you identify that God was bigger than Sunday morning experience?
Oh, I would honestly say when I became a single mother, at that time, I literally had lost everything. I lost my job, I lost my place. And when me and my first child father separated, I was sleeping on my sister's floor. And it caused me to pray to God more. I always knew God, I always knew how to pray because I was always in the church, but it caused me to really pray to God more. Instead of me laying on the floor at night, I'll be literally praying throughout the day. When I couldn't eat, I would be praying, and God placed me in a hospital. I never forget this job. And I was complaining about my situation. And the more I would go to work and I would talk to these people that only had 2 months to live, or people on cancer, it really geared me closer to God, and it just made me be so appreciative over what I was experiencing. It had my eyes open even the more, and the more I started connecting with more godly people, or people that was somewhat had the same goal or vision as me, that, believers in Christ, I would say. And me just being able to talk to other people and have prayer and impartation, I was able to experience God on another level. And just that alone moved me so much closer to God, just to be able to see how my life could be, but to see where God has me at. And just to be constantly reminded that I know your situation may seem tough, it may seem hard, but I'm right here with you. That itself made me seek out God even the more. I don't know how I would have gotten back up if I would have never sought God. And for me, I remember telling one of my best friends, actually, I remember in Baptist, you thought you had to be, I used to think you had to be perfect. You had to go to church every day. You couldn't do certain things. And for me to experience God in one of my depressed moments where I felt very low, it was powerful to me. And I'm very strong in advocating for the kingdom of God and letting everyone know God will meet you right where you are. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything right. God met me when I was depressed. God met me when I tried to take myself out, when I tried to kill myself. God met me right where I was, and his love picked me up.
That is so good. And I'm so glad that you were transparent, because a lot of the times in faith period, people don't want to talk about depression. It's frowned upon. But a lot of people, regardless of your economics, regardless of your titles, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you can find yourself in a depressive state. And so the fact that you were able to lean on your faith and that you were able to depend on God to see you through, that's actually a great testimony. Because a lot of the times people do hide behind it. They don't want to share it because they don't want to be judged, because you are made to feel in some instances that you have to be perfect. And we know that you don't have to be perfect. God knows that we were not going to be perfect, which is why he sent Jesus to die for us. So I am so glad that you talked about that. Can you just share what was the process like with you trying to rebuild? Because you stated that you lost your job, you lost your place, and so you had to really start over. What did that look like for you?
During the process itself, I could say was very confusing at times, not knowing where it was going to end at. But I can honestly say, with me continuing to push and not allowing my traumas or my experiences to define who I am, I had to realize, it's okay for your traumas and your experiences to shape you as a person, but you don't have to let them define who you are. So now, years later on down the line, I'm doing better. I'm not, exactly where I want to be, but I'm not where I was. That alone, just to see I'm not where I was and God pulled me out of that, is very amazing. Now, the process itself, actually going through it, trusting God, it was very challenging. It can be very tough at times, but not all days was hard. Not all days was very bad. I had very amazing times in the process of it as well.
So when you were going through that time, did you have a support system?
Initially, I didn't. I kind of stepped out on faith on my own. And it's like, as soon as I stepped out on faith and kind of, it got to be something bigger. It's kind of like God just started bringing people my way. I would go to stores, I would go to like conventions or just things. And I just started meeting so many women of God and men of God that poured into me, that in the moments where I felt low, I'll just come across someone, or I'll be on YouTube or something, and God will have me click on a video that just empowered me. So just being able to have people around me eventually, I would say it was good. I definitely would say I have a support system. I strongly believe that no one will be alone. It may not be a support system from your immediate family, but I can definitely look back and even to testify now that I definitely have a support system, whether it's family, spiritual family. I would definitely say I have a support system.
Yeah, that's really good, because a lot of the times what happens is when you find yourself going through things, the enemy wants to isolate you. And I think people don't realize that you need accountability partners. You need those people that are not going to allow you to get into that dark place. And so it's very important to make sure that you do surround yourself with people that are going to check in on you, people that are going to be able to recognize when you are a little different or to recognize when something is bothering you. I think that's very important. And so you talked about that you have kids. What is being a mom like?
Being a mom is so amazing. It's constantly a learning experience as well. Definitely learning your children, and then you growing as well. It can definitely be very challenging at times, but it's amazing as well too. It's something about having children that just push out this version inside of you, and just to see life itself and be able to say, God, you trust me to raise little people. You trust me to raise up your children. I would say it's amazing. I wouldn't regret it. Although I have, challenging times, I love it. Being a mom is amazing. Just to be able to put smiles on my children's faces is so amazing.
And then I know sometimes when you're raising your kids, do you ever notice like certain traits that they have that you have?
Absolutely. I remember one thing I remember I used to tell my son, you're so hard-headed. Oh my goodness. I would hear that a lot growing up. So just to hear and see some of the things, even down to the good personality traits, to happy and smiling and love God and the prayer warrior, just like me, I definitely see it. And it's amazing.
And so what would you say for parents? Because I know sometimes we may think that children don't pay attention or that they don't pick up on our behaviors. So what advice can you give for parents, especially if they are struggling and they may have like some challenges and they are not aware that their children are being attentive?
The first thing I would say, because I actually, if I'm being transparent with my son, before my daughter came, I went through a stage where my son was acting out. With me having that constant prayer life with God, of course, when I would go to God, he would, I would hear in his spirit some of the things that my son was dealing with. I had to come to God and just be very transparent and, ask God to help me in this moment. I'm learning to be a mother. I don't have it all together. There's something wrong with my son. God, help me. God, not only help me, but help me know how to deal with my son, God. And I just began to pray over my son every day. No matter what it is, I still pray to this day. Prayer. That would be my advice. Prayer, prayer, prayer. We need God. There's some things internally that you're going to have to deal with to be able to help your children. It's deep. It goes down to generational curses and things that you thought that didn't really affect you, that you probably, carried around in your heart when you was a child. So I would definitely suggest in healing, seeking God, ask God to really help you learn to raise your children. I had to break the habit of I was raised this way. It's okay he was raised that way, but it may not be the right way, or that may not be the approach for your children. Learn your children. Learn your love language of your children. I had to really learn my son's love language. How do I connect with my son? How can I get him to be happy? And communication. That would be the last thing I would say. Talk to your children. Communicate with your children. Apologize to your children. Acknowledge your children's feelings is a big thing as well too. That would be the advice I would definitely give to any parents that's listening.
That is so true, because I know that when we grew up, it was a bunch of yelling. We would get spankings, whoopings, whatever you want to call it. And so when I became a parent, I said I would never spank. I would never yell. And so my husband has the same stance. And so our daughter is 17. She's never had a whooping before. We don't yell at her. We don't curse at her. We don't call her out her name. We allow her to articulate her feelings. She's able to communicate how she feels. And, when I was coming up, that was considered back talking. You wasn't able to to say, I disagree, or you wasn't able to question, well, why do we have to do this? That was considered being disrespectful. So I do like that you brought up the point. Just because you were raised a certain way doesn't mean that you have to bring that into how you parent. Because I think a lot of the times people don't like the challenge of how, trying to find a different route of doing things. So I'm glad that you realize that, your child is a person. They do have feelings, and that they are to be acknowledged, and that your child, can communicate. And so we should communicate with them. We should validate their feelings, especially if we hurt their feelings or if we made them feel, any type of way. So I commend you for that. And for you to be young and to have, caught that this early in your parenting, kudos to you, because that is wisdom. That is beyond wise for you to be able to identify that. So when it comes to just friendships, what does friendships look like for you?
Friendships to me is family. I don't have too many friends. I have associates, of course. That's just me. I'm a nice person, but friendships to me is very close to me and dear to me. They're like my family. I'll do whatever I can. I look at them like family. And in the Bible, God says to take care of your family. So friendships, I keep them on the same level as my family. However, I can be here for you, pray with you, I'll laugh with you. We're going to cry together, but you're my sister, you're my brother. So I'm going to love them. Friendships is very deep to me. I see them on the level as my family.
And then you said associates. A lot of the times people don't have levels to their relationships. So were you always able to distinguish associates from friends, or did something happen and you had to realize that not everyone deserves to be in your inner space?
No, I was always able to identify those only because I'm just a natural, nice person. I can literally go into the store and I can strike up a conversation with someone. So it's natural for me to have associates. It's natural for me to have conversations or have a relationship with someone just because we do podcasting together. And that's just what we have in common. So for friendships to me and family, that's off of intimacy. That's off of bonding. And if I bond with you, it's going to naturally come for me to be here for you. Associates, it's easier for me to have that balancing because I know where we stand at in life. It's just a bonding thing for me.
So what would you say for people that are not open to establishing relationships? Maybe they've been hurt in the past. Maybe, they just haven't had a good experience. What advice would you be able to give a person that doesn't allow people to get to know them, or vice versa?
The first thing I would suggest, because I went through a season where I did isolate and I shut down, I would say definitely pray. Ask God to help you heal. It will have to start internally. Try to figure out where it roots from, where it grounded from. And do some internal healing so you'll be able to be open and accept the relationships that God is sending to you. But I would definitely suggest to ask God to heal you internally. Ask God to heal your heart and change your mind, because it starts with our mind. Your mind tell your body what to do. So ask God to renew your mind, renew your thinking. And I hope that'll help you open up.
That's good advice. I know I have come across a lot of people. Sometimes they don't even recognize if they have any issues, or if they, is the issue. And what I mean by that is sometimes you have people that find themselves in cycles, and then they don't even realize that they're in a cycle. So if let's just say you had a person in your life and you saw that they were going through cycles, but they wasn't able to identify that, what type of advice would you give them?
I always ask the person, because I actually have had conversations with people that I've noticed that was in a cycle. And my advice will always be step back and look at your life. Kind of get a list together and analyze the similarities, or what's common in what you're experiencing. Try to get down to the bottom and see, what do my experiences have in common? I guarantee you, if you sit down and you examine the similarities, you'll find the common denominator and kind of be able to see like, okay, maybe it's something with me. Like maybe I need to strengthen myself in this area, or maybe I need to stop allowing certain things to happen. But for me, I'm a visual person. I'm an action person. So sometimes I have to be able to reflect, actually think. There's times where we don't give ourselves time to think. We don't give ourselves time to be still and allow God. We move so quick where you don't get to actually process everything and see, oh my God, this is a cycle. This is something I'm commonly doing. I would suggest give yourself time, analyze, and reflect.
Reflection is definitely very important. Even when you're in prayer and you finish praying, you shouldn't like immediately get up or immediately dismiss yourself, because even in that time we have to be still to listen to what God has for us. So I'm glad that you talked about just, slowing down, allowing yourself to be able to process things, allowing yourself to be able to hear from God, because that is very important. And so you have a platform where you focus on women. Can you kind of talk about your love for women and why you are drawn to women as far as in ministry?
Yes, ma'am. So for me, again, like for my lowest moment in my life was when I became a single mother. That was very traumatic for me. And personally, I've watched so many generational curses when it comes down to women. And I just wanted to be that advocate, just to let women know you are so beautiful. You are so important. And if women isn't reminded of this, or if we don't have anyone to push us, who else is going to do it? And I definitely have a heart for women because I've experienced it myself. I know as a mother how I felt, or as a woman how I felt, and I never want any woman to go through that. Never. I never felt that low in my life. That was the lowest I felt in my life. So I definitely have a heart for women, just to encourage them and let them know we all go through things. As women, it doesn't make you any less. You're still fearfully and wonderfully made. You are still called by God. And whatever I can do to push any woman to become the best version of they can be, I will do that.
And so what would you say if a woman is listening and she maybe is still in the low place, or if she feels like, this will never end for her? What advice can you give her to kind of move forth into her fullness that God has for her?
I would definitely say that God has plans to prosper you, not hinder you and not harm you, but to prosper you. That scripture was what helped me get out of my dark place. And my women empowerment group is called Girl, Get Up and Flow. And I would tell any woman that is listening right now that may feel low, may feel down, or may just not have any hope. Girl, get up and flow. Flow into the flourishing woman that God has called you to be. If you're able to just see God and ask God, how does he see you? How did he create you to be? You'll be able to see that there's a version on the inside of you that you couldn't even imagine. You just have to get up and just continue flowing into the beautiful person you are.
I love that name, Girl, Get Up and Flow. So that is your group. And so what are some of the things that you do in your group to kind of encourage women?
I constantly upload scriptures. It just means I do mental wellness checks where I post in my group and just ask the women, how are you feeling? How are you? Just continuing to encourage them. I do reach out to some of my members just to check on them, just to see, I don't want it to just be an internet thing. I really want people to know that there's other women out here that is willing to be a part of your village. It takes a village to live life, not just raise a child. It takes a village to continue going through life. So I definitely try to have a lot of engagement into my community, checking on my women. I'm just encouraging them daily. I plan to start having more things involved as far as having people come in and pray. Let's start having meetings in person and just make sure everyone's literally feeling good. Like if you don't sit back and be silent, what can we do as a community? What can we do to come together? Because when two or more are together, God is in the mix. Don't sit back. So that's what I try to do.
That's really good. And how did you come up with that name? Because that name is just so like catchy. It's breathtaking. Because when you said "girl, get up and flow," I literally pictured a woman on the beach with, you know how they have the long dresses and the wind is just literally just blowing that dress. So when I heard the name, I just pictured like a place of peace. So where did you get that name from?
When I first started going onto Facebook and praying or just praying for people in my low state, God would constantly tell me, girl, get up and flow. That's exactly what I would hear in the spirit. Like I would hear God tell me, get up and flow to the woman I've called you to be. Yes, you're depressed. Yes, you may feel sad. You may feel like you don't have much, but if you get up and flow into the glory, flow into the grace that I've given you, you will prosper. You will win. You will see the other side. So that came from a woman who got up from the low and started flowing into what God has called me to be. So I encourage other women, get up and flow, girl. Flow into your fearfully and wonderfully self God has made you to be.
I know that's right. So when you began to flow, were you afraid? Like, did you think maybe you would fail, or did you trust and have confidence that God would guide and lead you?
When I began to flow, absolutely not. I think it's once, those crowds started, forming against you. I kind of got afraid then, but my revelation that I received from the word, it definitely lit a fire up inside of me. So at first, initially, I was not scared. I was ready. I was like, let's go flow. I'm finna walk. I thought it was going to be like a walk in the park, but I was really ready.
That is really good. Because I remember when I was younger and I was transitioning. I was in a relationship that I shouldn't have been in, first off. And so when I ended the relationship, I was sad. And it was so funny because how you heard God say, get up and flow. I literally heard him say, why are you crying? You had no business in that relationship anyway. And so it was one of those moments to where I had my aha moment. Like it was basically translated what you just said, girl, get up and flow. Cause I found myself in a relationship with an older gentleman and I had no business in that relationship. And I think the reason why I was in that relationship is because I didn't realize that I was dealing with issues of not having my father consistently in my life. And so when I was 19, 18, I found myself in a relationship with someone that was, I think, 12 years older than me. No business being in that relationship. And so what I come to realize now that I'm older, that is very important for us to tackle and make sure we address issues, because a lot of people may feel like my mom not being in my life or my dad not being in my life, it doesn't affect me. But I assure you that you may have some suppressed things going on, or you may have some things that you are not really focusing on, but it's an impact of, that rejection or that abandonment. And so just hearing you say, God was like, girl, get up and flow. I clearly heard God tell me, stop crying because you had no business in that relationship anyway. And so that relationship ending was the best thing for me because it actually pushed me into the woman I am today. It pushed me into, being able to meet my husband and be in a good relationship. So for the women that are listening, if you are in that place and you feel like it's not going to get better, I assure you that it is going to get better. And especially if it's a place where you may have broken up with someone, God is moving and clearing the way out for you to meet the person that he has created for you to meet. I can assure you that. So Annastacia, what would you say about goals? Like, do you encourage women to create goals for themselves?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like once you, first off, one of my favorite scriptures, write the vision, make it plain. I feel like if you have goals or you have something that you're achieving at, it's going to give you that push. It's going to give you that discipline. If you're able to say, I want to be here, you're going to try your best to get to that goal. When you don't have any goals and you're just living, you can become very stagnant. So I definitely encourage other women, even men that's listening, write down your goals, make them plain. It's to me, when I'm writing my goals, that's me asking God for things. Ask and you shall receive.
Yes, that's very important to ask, because I know sometimes we just we just complain instead of just really, writing it down, making sure that we hold ourselves accountable to achieving it, and then ask God to help us in those areas. So if you could share with the audience what your all of your social media platforms are, and then I want you to leave them with one final thought.
Yes, ma'am. So on my Facebook, for my women empowerment group, you can search A Girl Get Up and Flow. I do have a podcast. I'm in the works of renaming it, but for now it is Uncut Truth with Anna. I believe it's on over 20 platforms. You can search it and find it that way as well. Let's see. What do I want to leave for you guys? I would say it's okay to let our past experiences or traumas shape you, but do not allow them to define who you are as a person. Continue to keep striving, no matter what you've endured or encountered.
Listen, that is some great advice. I am so grateful that you joined us today, because you are young, but you are full of wisdom. And so I will link all of her information onto my website, brooksdeming.com. And I really want you guys to connect with her, because like I said, she is doing some great things for women and through women. So if you guys are listening and you find yourself in a place to where you could be low, you could be medium, you could be high, it doesn't matter. I want you guys to connect, because Annastacia has wisdom. She has empathy, compassion, and love for what God has put her here to do. So Annastacia, again, thank you so much for joining me. You have been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you so very much for inviting me. I'm so honored. Thank you so much again, Dr. Brooks.
Anytime. This concludes today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. I hope the information presented adds value to your life. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Brooks Deming. The sponsor of today's episode was Clothed by J. Christine, a Christian clothing store offering quality and affordable clothing for the everyday fashionable conscious woman. To learn more about today's guest, visit brooksdeming.com. Until next time, be resilient.
Thanks for joining. Please rate this episode and share this podcast with your family and friends. To learn more about your host, visit www.brooksdeming.com.